themselves and what they're doing. The first person I am pleased to introduce is Chief Sequan Pijaki, aka Chief George Spring Buffalo. He's the chairman of the Pocasset Wampanoag tribe of the Pokanoket Nation. And he is co-founder of the Pocasset Pokanoket Land Trust, and also the co-founder of the Indigenous Peoples Network of Massachusetts and Rhode Island.
I'm really sorry, but can I break in just for a second?
Yeah.
We would really love to record this.
Oh,
and so what we want to say is, if you are not comfortable being part of the recording, please just turn off your camera. Okay, and so with that, we are going to start recording. Sorry, thanks.
Thanks, Emily. No, important to mention, certainly. Okay, and then my second speaker, who's also works very closely with Chief Sequan, is ULUM AHTOHIL, and she is from the Global Village kind of land program, experiment activity, and she's going to tell us more about that as well. But so I want to hand it over to my two speakers, and perhaps Chief Sequan, you can start by just introducing yourself and give a short description of the work that you're doing, and then we'll hand it over to ULUM.
Thank you. Titumpus, Mat Wat Keok, Ki Tumpakat, Quinianamu, Machini, Tabatne, this Nisam, Masheme, Kawi, Mui Wansika, Aho. Basically, what I just said was the honor to be here, and I'm welcoming your blessings today. So basically, I'm a direct descendant of Massasoit, which we call Asamiquan, as you know, as Massasoit, and we call Asamiquan and Yellow Feather. So, I'm also a direct descendant of Matter. Can you hear me?
Pause you for a moment. I'm very sorry. I think some of the people are having a little trouble hearing you, so I just want to make sure your important words get transmitted.
So he's not in the English channel?
Do you have the English channel selected by any chance? I think that would just make sure that everyone who selected English is able to hear you, and the interpreters are able to hear you as well. It should be an option for language down on the bottom menu. There should be an option for English.
Okay, let me see.
Right next to record, in between record and reactions. There's a little globe.
Okay. I see it, but I don't see it.
If you click on that little globe on the bottom of your screen, it's a little icon, and you should get a pop-up with English or Spanish language, and then mute original channel or original audio.
Looking.
Is it possible? Yeah, great, thank you. And everyone should do this. It seems like there's some difference in experience between people, but I think if everyone who's broadcasting English selects English, we should be all set.
And mute.
Chief Sequan, did you?
Can you hear me now? Oh.
I can hear you, yeah. I can hear you, and I'm in the English channel.
Is anyone not able? All right, seems like that fixed the problem. Emily, you weren't able to hear earlier. Are you able to hear now? And you selected English, Emily?
Can everybody else hear me?
Oh,
I haven't muted original audio, and I can hear him, but I didn't mute original audio.
I could hear him, and then I couldn't. And then I just unmuted original audio,
And you can
and
hear me?
now I can hear you.
Oh, I can too. Unmute original, and then now I can hear you.
All right.
Okay.
I guess the solution we have right now is just unmuting original audio. I think we should just move forward with that, since that's the solution we have. Is anyone unable to hear even with that option enabled? Say so in the chat now. Otherwise, we're gonna keep going.
Thank you,
Okay.
Asa.
So what did you hear that I said?
So why don't you start again, Chief? Just tell us again
Okay.
who you
You want
are,
me-
and
Right.
direct descendant and all of that. Yeah,
Okay.
and a bit of the work you're doing. Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry. We're
Okay.
good.
So again, I'm a direct descendant of Asamiquan, which you know as Massasoit. I'm also a direct descendant of King Philip, who also is recognized as Matacomet. I'm also a descendant of Weedamo, who was the queen of the Pocassets that come from the Pokanoket Nation. A lot of people use the word Wampanoag, and when we recognize our tribe, we state that we're the Pocasset Wampanoag tribe of the Pokanoket Nation. The Pokanoket was the nation. Wampanoag was given to us, the people that fought with King Philip after the King Philip's War, so that they could substantiate who were people that fought with him and who didn't. If you was a Pokanoket, they would kill you on sight because they wanted to demolish the royal line. A lot of our family was also sold into slavery after the King Philip War. So a lot of us migrated out into different territories and so on. So my family so happened survived. A lot of people thought that we were gone, but we're not. Also, I come from the Watuppa Reservation. The Watuppa Reservation originated in Tiverton, Rhode Island, Fall River, Freetown State Forest. That area there was all Pocasset area. It was part of the Pocasset Purchase, okay, that a lot of people don't realize. First it was the Freeman Purchase and the Pocasset Purchase. That Pocasset Purchase was lands that we traded so that the rest of our royal line could be together, and we have a deeded reservation in Fall River, which is called the Watuppa Reservation. That Watuppa Reservation was the first deeded reservation ever in the country. Again, people don't know that. We were always a recognized tribe by the federal government because our documentation is over in Europe, it's not here. So when you hear federal tribes that are saying they're going to get land and trust and, you know, they're going to get federal recognition, our tribe does not want that, because what it does, it takes away from our sovereign rights. We come from the king and the queen. We were the original treaty signers from colonial times. So our documentation is not here in the United States, and that's why we keep that name as the Pokanoket Nation, because that is where our treaties were signed, not Wampanoag. But we keep Wampanoag because nowadays, again, when we go a little more into reparations, that's what's on the documentation now that the United States, the state, recognizes our tribal entity of. So therefore, we're collecting both our rights. We're correcting our rights to, as a foreign national, as a Pokanoket, because that's what we are. We still hold our Aboriginal rights. We still hold hunting and fishing rights, which is our maritime treaty. If you look that up, that maritime treaty goes from Massachusetts. Down that line there was all the maritime treaty. So that hunting and fishing, where a lot of people call conservation lands and open space, That's our maritime treaties where I can go on your land and you can't do nothing about it. And I can hunt and fish because that's a right that I have. People don't know that, but they've soon learned that. And we just had a meeting with the environmental police for the state of Massachusetts, informing them that they don't have to give us permission now that they're trying to change the culture, that we've always had permission, and now we're telling them that we can police our own lands. So there's a lot out there that people want to tell you what you can do, but if you know your rights and you know your treaties, then you're telling them what to do, but you're also educating other people especially your people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's original where we came from. Land is still in Fall River, Massachusetts. We have a house on that land since 1709. 1709 was when we was deeded that reservation forever. In 1907, the city of Fall River wanted the water, and the state did a deal with them where they took a portion of our land by eminent domain, which was the illegal taking because we held the deed. At the time, they burnt us out. There was one house remaining. So a lot of our family migrated into Providence, into Worcester, you know, around, because we were more of the educated folks that were there. What was left there was a lot of folks that were illiterate. So they pretty much abused and abused them. So they took our land by eminent domain because they didn't want us to poison the water. So, but we still have access to all that land, and we never gave that up. So, Freetown State Forest, we have 227 acres there that was given to us in the Act of 1934, where again, that never came through, but it's on the books, so they can't take it back because that was governed by the federal government. So we still recognize that lands that's there in Freetown State Forest, which the lands in on our reservation is land simple, but the lands in Fall River are more of a reservation aspect of things through a 1939 Act. So just to give you a little history of where we're at there, okay.
That's super helpful, Chief. And I wonder, you know, you've kind of brought in, you know, the history and a bit of, you know, what happened over the years. Can you talk to me then about, in that context, what does reparations mean to you and for you?
Well, right. Reparations to me doesn't mean, like some people say, excuse me, that, oh, you know, you owe us all this money and, you know, for doing work for you and all this other stuff, because that's never going to happen. You know, there's no way in this country that we can't even at this point admit that Biden's president. So you think that we're going to get money for lands that were taken from us or anything else? You know, not in my lifetime. I'm 64 years old, so I'm not going to see that. So, and I don't think my kids or their kids are going to see it either. So to me, reparation signifies what can we get back? And what we did was Twin Rivers Casino wanted to build a second casino in Tiverton, Rhode Island. Well, where they were building was lands that were the first battle of King Philip's on Sucker Brook. And that was where Massasoit's first son, which a lot of people again don't know, was killed, and he's still buried over there somewhere. So what we did was, again, using our reparations, is that we said, if you're going to build a casino there, we're going to fight you. And even though we don't have as much money as you, we have entitlement of the direct descendants of artifacts, burial grounds, so on. That's a federal law that you have to come through, and you have to provide a survey and so on. So either you can do a deal with us, and at the time they were trying to beat out the casinos in Massachusetts, Wynn and so on, to open up before them. So it was about revenue. So the way I look at it, revenue meets revenue. So if you want revenue to, you know, get in front of them casinos, then you would have to do a deal with the Pocassets. And not that we have to take you to court or you have to take, we can sit down and we can work out some type of agreement that you wouldn't disturb certain, you know, scattered sites that were around, suck through all the land that's around the casino, and that you would also set up a land trust for us to repatriate some land back to us. And that's how I look at reparations. Land is everything. Without land, you don't have anything. So we worked out a deal, but we also got a few other perks in there where we have preference on jobs, not just for our tribe, for any indigenous folk that we want to bring in and get them a job. We have preference on vendors. So right now we have 2 vendors that are not native vendors, but they're our vendors that we brought in. And so, and we get kickbacks from them for, you know, them having a contract. They pay us every month for a contract, for a 5-year contract or so on. But they also purchased some other lands for us around the casino. Our land trust now is starting to take off. We created some programs where we got a couple of large grants through the USDA, and now we're in the programs of the federal on the federal side, where we're doing things that federal tribes were doing, and we kind of jumped in that door with the USDA and other federal programs where they're like, well, we never done this before. But you are right, these programs are out there for everybody. So this is something that we want to work also with you on, so that you can introduce to other clans and different state tribes and so on, educate them to some of the programs. So now we're working hand in hand with the federal government by not being a federal tribe. So it's jumping over stuff. So reparations, again, going back to us, is what we can get through local, state, federal, and make it work for our benefit so that we can capture either back lands. You know, we met with some other land trusts where they're snatching up lands for open space and conservation to preserve. And what we said was that we're the only native land trust. So we're going to collaborate with these other land trusts that are on other territories of Nipmuc or Shinnecock or Narragansett or whoever. And we're going to say, if you're capturing these lands through open space and conservation, you need to partner with us so that we can return some of these lands back to the rightful people, and they can steward their own lands, and they can work with your nonprofit or your land trust for grants and benefits, and it's a win-win situation. So that's kind of where we are with reparations.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, so interesting, right? It's not just about the federal government by any means, right? It's local, it's corporates, it's nonprofits, it's local partners. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. I just want to bring ULUM's voice in a bit and have her introduce herself, and also just speak a little bit about what you're doing at the Global Village, and then we'll go back to the Chief.
Hi, everyone. I know a lot of you. My name is ULUM PIXAN, is my native Mayan name, and it means bird spirit. I was born on the day of the colibri or hummingbird, and I was named ULUM PIXAN. And my government name is Dania Flores, is what is in my documents. We call it the colonizer name. And I am a migrant from Guatemala, and I live now in Massachusetts and Grafton, just between Boston, Worcester, and Providence. And our project came to fruition when I came to this country, the second year that I was here, I became part of a nonprofit called English for Action, and I was a tutor ESL for adults learning English as a second language. And we, I finally got a community. For 2 years. I didn't have a lot of community back here. I came with my two daughters. And the project started by having a class and talk about how much we all miss our country and access to land and access to do farm work and animal caring. And I would say our connection to the land is part of our traditional religion and mental health. So Global Village is basically the fruit of that class. For about 11 years, we were looking for lands and structure that actually look like what we were dreaming, that be able to own land collectively. And I say own in a very unhappy, painful way. We believe that Mother Earth is our mother, so who can't own pieces of a mother, and who has the right to divide it? But unfortunately, we live in a capitalist society and white supremacist society here in the US. And we were trying to find ways to do what we wanted to do legally. And so we started having conversation with Chief George, or Chief Sequent Pajeke, and we started talking about how we can own together from indigenous to indigenous. And that's how we formed first the Indigenous Peoples Network, which is a network of indigenous people from the US and indigenous people from all over the world, and try to see how we can work together to own land. First to, be able, like he was explaining, to repatriate some lands back to the original peoples, but also how to do it as an indigenous that is, I would say, squatting in these lands, that make it in a way that is most respectful, acknowledging that a lot of migrants or immigrants usually don't have access also to the money to buy or do the work that we wanted to do. So we work together. Right now, our first project is Global Village Farms here in Grafton. We have 52 acres of, some land is farmland, some land is forest land. A lot of the land has a lot of historical significance for the Massachusetts people and Nipmuc people. And from those 52 acres, 17 acres are in conservation through the Pocasset Pokanoket Land Trust. And we work in exchange of education, because a lot of indigenous folks here in the US have lost, at least in the Northeast, have lost access to land. So here in Grafton, after colonization, the reservation of the Nipmucs started with like 3,000 acres, something like that, and now it just have 4.5 acres. And so for us, we wanted to do the right thing. We don't know what that exactly looked like, but we are like really trying to exercise our brain muscle and our heart muscle and trying to find ways to do the right thing. So we have an education program together, and we teach food access and how to farm and how to do soil reparation and all kinds of food justice stuff. But we also do healing through plants and healing through food and exercise. And we have a couple young kids program and youth programs to try to, keep alive the food justice movement and also environmental justice movement with Native or Indigenous lens.
Thank you, ULUM. And I also want to publicly apologize for saying your name wrong. ULUM PIXAN, I apologize. Kalibi, that's so pretty. So I apologize. Thank you for sharing that. I think what's so interesting about that is the the relationship between you and Chief and the like sharing of resources and the recognition that like as a migrant Indigenous person from the Americas, that there is a need to be in right relationship with with the other people that are from this land, right? And kind of share that and work on it together, work on that vision together. We only have a couple more minutes. I can't believe how fast this time has gone. But Chief, I want to throw it back to you and just ask you kind of in closing, what are the best ways for acts of reparation to be carried out in your opinion? And if you could give any examples, especially of small acts of reparation. I remember you mentioned something to me of individuals and their acts of reparation. But if you could just speak to that before we close this section.
Yes, there's probably 4 different individuals that every month they pay a mortgage. They send land trust a portion of money, and they do it out of respect for being on Indigenous lands, having relations with us, and for their own personal need of, moral needs. And I think that we've been reaching out to a lot of different foundations, institutions, the same thing. I think that should, it should be like the chain. It should travel, because I think before we can get the state or the federal government to get to that point, we as a people have to get there first. And I think that, the motto of the grassroots funds with Bernie Sanders and, a little bit of money and all that, I think that carries more weight than trying to go after big chunks and, make it popular and so on. I think long term, just like us with the casino, we could have give us $2 million and, we're good. And in the meantime, we had no homeland, no nothing. My thing is long-term reparations, that jobs are permanent, vendors are permanent, land access is permanent. So I think that when we talk about, getting back, then we have to deal with individuals, just like even on this Zoom meeting here, is that's how we get things done. Collaborating, what your needs are, what my needs are, and let's open up each other's Rolodex and move on.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to thank you both for being with us today and sharing. I think we're just right up at time, but if anybody had kind of one quick question, or we could even, type something in the chat, if anything, but, I wanted to open it up to questions, but we had such good conversation that we didn't end up doing that. Well, okay. Well, I guess we will turn it back over to you, Emily. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, ULUM. Really appreciate your presence here today.
Oh.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That was fantastic. And even though I've known about Global Village for a while, yeah, I learned a lot and want to connect. So let's see, Hendrix, can you throw up the next slide? So the next one is food and farming, and Alex Plowden from LEAF is going to be the moderator on that. And I will let you, Alex, just take it away.
All right, I want to give Jessica as much time as possible to talk. So I'm very pleased to introduce to you all Jessica Wilson from Mill City Grows. She's the executive director of Mill City Grows, a food justice and urban agriculture organization in Lowell, Massachusetts. Jessica has over 15 years of nonprofit leadership and fundraising experience in both Lowell, Mass and New York City. She has managed teams of all sizes to design, fund, and operate successful programs that support people and the planet. Jessica has been part of the leadership of Mill City Grows since its inception, first serving as a founding member and president of the Mill City Grows board, and then joining the development staff in 2016. She holds a BA in communications from UMass Amherst, an MA in media studies from the New School, and a graduate certificate from the Institute of Nonprofit Management and Leadership at Boston University. And without further ado, Jessica, please take it away.
Hi, thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for inviting me here to chat today. I really enjoyed listening to Chief and ULUM talking about the reparations work and the work at Global Villages, because there's, I think we're trying to do a lot of the same type of food justice work at Mill City Grows. That's been our mission for 10 years. So it's, you know, have so much respect for the work that you're doing, and hope that I can share a little bit about what we're doing here in Lowell, Massachusetts. So I have some pictures I'll share with you. Can everybody see that? Okay. All right, fantastic. So Mill City Grows was founded, are we sharing out? I'm sorry. I think I had a technical issue here. All right. So Mill City Grows was founded by two friends of mine, Lydia Sisson and Francie Slater, in 2011. And their goal was really, you know, both of them were working in food. They were living in Lowell, but working in food organizations in different communities. And Lydia, as part of her graduate school work, did a community food assessment in Lowell and tried to find out, you know, where people were getting their food and what kind of were the gaps in the food system in Lowell. And what she found in that study was that most people were buying their food at a place that looked like this. There's lots of corner stores in Lowell, and most people in Lowell live far enough from a grocery store that they're not able to get to the grocery store as often as they would like. And so when they're shopping for produce, they're restricted to a really small selection. If there's anything at a store like this, there's usually one or two different types of produce, and they usually cost about 3 times as much as they would at a grocery store. We also found that, like, people were having to make choices between what kind of food they bought based on their budget. And so, you know, dollar for dollar, they could get more calories from a fast food hamburger than they could from an apple at a convenience store, which was really overpriced. And so they weren't able to always make a choice to eat more produce. When we asked people, they said, you know, the majority of people all said, we know that we would be having better long-term health if we ate more fruit and vegetables, but you know, 4 in 10 people that we spoke to said they couldn't access more produce simply because 1, they couldn't get to a grocery store, or 2, if they did get to a grocery store, they weren't able to afford that fresh produce. And Lowell's a city of a little over 100,000 people. So that was nearly, you know, approaching 50,000 people who are saying they can't afford produce in their diet. So we started working really closely with the city of Lowell and community members to figure out how we could take the resources of this, you know, unused land in our city and grow food on that land and get it back to the people who were missing this food from their diet. And so we founded Mill City Grows with the mission that we would help people improve their physical health, their economic independence, and also the sustainability of our local environment by increasing people's access to land, locally grown food, and food education. And we're really based, you know, our mission is based in this idea of food justice, that, you know, we're not interested in telling people what they should be eating. We are really interested in making sure that everybody has equitable access to the food that they want, to food that reflects their culture, to food that, you know, is nutritious and helps them feel good, and things that they feel good about feeding their families. And so we started in 2011 with one community garden. We had beds for 40 families. And since that time, we've added lots of other programming to what we offer to folks in Lowell. And this is all coming from the idea that, you know, our food system here in Lowell was not working for everybody. And so we've gradually added pieces to our local food system so that there are lots of different ways that people can access fresh produce. And so this is kind of, you know, visually what we were looking at, you know, when we were in Lowell. Was there were several lots that kind of were abandoned. They might have been city property. They looked a little bit like this. We looked at them and, you know, rather than seeing kind of detriment in our community, we saw this as a resource and wanted to think about ways that we could work together with people in the community to reclaim this resource. And so it really started with, you know, community outreach and organizing and an idea and understanding, you know, what are the foods that people really wanted. And in some cases, Lowell is an incredibly diverse city. We have people from probably speak over 50 different languages, and have lots of very varied cultural diets. And so there were types of produce that people were looking for that they couldn't find in grocery stores. But we had lots of local resources of folks who knew how to grow this food, so they could work together and try to figure out ways that we could grow it here in New England. So once we were able to convert these plots safely to places that could grow food, you know, and there are people that could volunteer and be part of that process. There were also people who wanted to access the food that didn't have the time resource to grow as well. And so we developed this mobile market program that was able to take some of the food and deliver it to lots of different neighborhoods in Lowell where people could purchase it. And we also are able to sell produce to folks who use WIC or SNAP. So if people are using subsidies to purchase their food, they're able to use those at our mobile market. And then we were able to build partnerships with other people throughout the city, just so that we could keep widening this food system so that more and more people could participate in it. So this is our very first urban farm. This was the plot when we first saw it. And this was the plot during the growing season a few years ago. It's a really interesting space. This is 1/8 of an acre, so it's a really tiny piece of land. We're able to grow, you know, over the course of the growing season, anywhere from, you know, 1,000 to 4,000 pounds of food on this plot. It's actually also right across the street from the Lowell Transitional Living Center, which is a homeless shelter. And so we've actually, you know, been able to donate a lot of produce to that group. And folks have actually come over and helped volunteer with us. And we've been able to do a lot of outreach this way and just meet people in our community. So it's, you know, it's definitely like brightening up this area of the city and also providing people with lots of really great food. Oh, and just so our land is, none of our land is owned by Mill City Grows. This particular plot is actually owned by a private business owner. It was meant to be a parking lot for his business. And when he first opened it, he said, you know, he didn't have the budget to pave. He didn't really have a need for a parking lot. We had met with him and he thought this would be a great use of the space. So we actually are able to access this land totally rent-free and for the time being to grow food in this way. The other land that we work on in Lowell, some of it is city-owned property and some of it is owned by the University of Massachusetts. And so all of this work we do kind of in partnership with the landholders, taking some plots that they're not using and then repurposing it so that we can provide more food for the community. This is just a snapshot of, you know, some of the programs that we run over the course of the year. So we have a big focus on food access, and, you know, over the past year, that focus has really grown. People's need for food in Lowell has really skyrocketed. The pandemic, as I'm sure all of you know, has really affected people's ability to get food. Communities of color have been hardest hit. And, you know, in most cases in urban areas like Lowell, I think there was a study done recently that over 50% of Black and Latinx families were facing, food insecurity on a regular basis due to the pandemic. And so we really have grown more food than we typically do, and done a lot more outreach to make sure that we're getting this produce that we grow to the people who need it most. So we have 3 sites where we farm in Lowell. This past year, we ran 4 mobile markets from July through November in different neighborhoods throughout Lowell. And we have 7 community gardens where over 400 individuals are able to access a garden plot and grow throughout the growing season. And then over the years, we've actually started doing more food education. And one of the reasons for that was, a lot of our students grow up in this urban area and they don't have a lot of opportunities to get outside, to get in nature, to interact with the environment. And so we wanted to be a part of solving that problem and making sure that there were spaces where children could learn outside, learn about food. There really aren't, health and nutrition classes in a lot of our public schools. And so we have been partnering with the schools, I think since 2014, doing some in-school and some after-school programming so that the kids can get out and actually get their hands in the dirt and garden with us and learn how to cook the food that they grow. And a few years after that, we expanded to do cooking classes with families. So some of the students that are involved in school gardens, they sign up with their parents to come cook with us. And that picture of the little girl shucking corn is at one of those classes. And the whole family actually, comes to these classes together. And so the idea is that everybody is learning a new skill. We provide all of the food for the class. We actually give everybody a bag of groceries they can take home so they can practice what they learned and make it again. And, we wanted to really offer some assistance to parents and give them an opportunity to experiment with involving everyone in the family in cooking and giving everyone a role so that every member of the family, no matter how old they are, really feels empowered to be part of this process of feeding and nourishing the whole family. Community gardens were our very first program, as I mentioned. We started out in 2011 with 1 community garden with 40 plots, and we have since grown to 7, and we're actually opening our 8th in 2021, which is really exciting. And the idea, behind our community gardens was there were so many people who wanted to be able to grow their own food, share the experience of growing food with their families, and interact with other people who are interested in growing, that these have become spaces where people, there's a lot more than gardening that's happening in these spaces, and some of our garden leaders have actually taken opportunities to use the spaces for community meetings, plays, art exhibits, potlucks, and things like that. So, and these were, in almost every instance, our gardens were built in lots that were completely, abandoned. So they might've been part of a public park that had become a place for dumping trash, or a lot beside, a house that had been really, unbuildable for environmental reasons. And so we build these beds, we fill them with compost. A lot of the materials we get donated, or we find, grant funding to help build these. And then we fund a couple of staff members who work with volunteers to run the spaces throughout the growing season. Our education programs are with kids of all ages. So we do work with our local public school system, but we also do summer programming. We have jobs for high school youth, and then we do, we have done in the past field trips at our urban farm for different summer programs. We weren't able to do any of that. Of course, in 2020, we really wanted to keep, groups to a minimum as much as possible for people's health and safety. And so we actually converted a lot of our programming to the virtual space, which, for growing food is not really as fun. And the experience isn't quite the same. So one of the ways that we got around that was we worked with some volunteers to create like seedling kits that students could take home and grow seedlings with their parents. And then we had check-ins with them over the course of the summer. And then we have our urban farms. So right now, this actually needs a little bit of an update. We have over 5 acres that we're growing on. Some of this is land that's owned by the city of Lowell, that's in kind of an unbuildable conservation site. And we also have some space at UMass Lowell where we're growing as well. Over the past couple of years, we've cultivated 68 different kinds of crops. A lot of them are cultural crops that have surveyed our participants and our customers and asked them what they're looking for. So we grow a variety of eggplants and hot peppers and different greens that are really sought after by a lot of our customers and hard to find in grocery stores. And we did have in-person volunteers came out to our farm to help us grow over the past summer. It was much reduced to what we've done in years past, but we had, I think we usually have 500 or more volunteers. This past year, we had about 130 in very small groups doing socially distanced work. And we typically grow about 30,000 pounds a year. Last year, we actually really tried to be as efficient as possible and grow as much as possible because we were distributing food to more people than ever. And we actually grew close to 40,000 pounds. And then we have our mobile market. So as I mentioned earlier, we kind of trimmed the schedule down from 11 stops a week to 4. And that was partially for health and safety reasons. One, because we needed more staffing to run the markets to separate produce handling from money handling and make sure people were social distancing. And we do, our goal is that more than 50% of our customers are getting our food totally free of cost, whether it's through a donation or using the SNAP or WIC program. And we honor farmers market coupons for WIC and the senior food program. And this is just a little snapshot of what we did in 2018 to 2019. So over all of our sites, we grew over 42,000 pounds of food. We had 450 gardeners across all of our programs. We sold $84,000 worth of produce, and we worked with almost 600 young people in our education programs and 28 families in our cooking classes. So just pause right there for a moment. I have a couple of videos of just some other people working at Mill City Grows because I wanted an opportunity to share their voices as well. But I didn't know if anybody had any questions before I moved on or anything that you wanted me to address specifically that might be helpful. And I can keep an eye on the chat as well. Okay, I will share a video. This is of one of my colleagues, and he can tell you a little bit about life on the farm.
Hi, I'm Dai Kim, and I work as a food advocate for food justice with Mill City Grows. Support from the Be Good Foundation will help us grow our programs to meet the needs of more Lowell residents, empowering them to be the change they wish to see in our food system. It's so important that Mill City Grows provides us food year-round. As you can see, we're out here in the dead of winter as it looks like, and despite popular belief, we're still growing things out here. Food access is extremely important. Stats are staggering in terms of people not actually being able to get to a grocery store, whether it be lack of transportation or even folks with low income. Our major production comes out of 2 urban farms. We've got one on Middlesex Street, right in the heart of the city, in downtown, and we've got this beautiful scene out here, almost 4 acres out on the skirts of Pocasset. I think this year alone, we've produced almost 30,000 pounds of food. During the summertime, we've invited thousands of volunteers here out to the farm. We've held sessions in our Middlesex garden in downtown where folks can come out and kind of help with build projects or weeding or harvesting. Not only do we use this space as a place for volunteerism, but it's an educational space, and it really builds community and builds connection. Our work in food justice is rooted in the idea that a well-educated community with regular access to nutritious foods will make healthier choices. Please join us in growing a healthy community in Lowell. With your support, we can create more school and community gardens and connect more residents and families with the fresh foods and meaningful relationships that help this community thrive.
What I want to grow is like a lot of tomatoes and tomatoes everywhere.
What I want to grow in the school garden is carrots.
I would like to plant watermelon because it's my favorite fruit to eat in the summer.
So I just did want to give you an opportunity to see some of the faces that are out there as part of our community. Through all of our programming, we generally work with about 15,000 people over the course of the year. So some of those folks might be customers at our mobile markets. We have, thousands of students that come through our school gardens, and we really wanted to get people closer to where their food comes from, so that they can kind of understand the process behind it. And a lot of the work that we do with young people is really teaching about food justice and food advocacy. So, understanding that there's this whole system that's very invisible to them about where their food comes from. And we talk a lot about, who is farming the land, how are those workers treated, and what are the the types of chemicals that they're using on the land, and how does that affect the environment. And I think that has been an opportunity to have conversations with kids where they're hearing this for the first time, and then kind of grappling with making these different choices and going home and having some really interesting conversations with their families about the food choices that they want to make. And bringing new recipes home, or wanting to learn more about their home culture and cooking in their home culture than they had before. So it has, I think, had impacts large and small, like we're, on one level being able to infuse like 40,000 pounds of produce into our community that wasn't there before, and all the impacts that has on people's well-being. But then also, I think the food education piece for us is really about building a group of folks in our community who have a passion for growing food and a passion for food justice, that will spread that message, to their family and friends, and kind of grow up with this as a priority in their mind and in their community. So one of the big initiatives that we've been working on over the past couple of years is really linking what we do to some of the healthcare system in Lowell. There's a huge discrepancy in terms of like folks who have diet-related disease in Lowell, like hypertension, diabetes, and a lot of that, stems from lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to fresh food. And so we wanted to work with folks and kind of make a bigger impact on helping support long-term health for people in our community by getting them the access to food and pairing that with the nutrition education that they're getting from healthcare providers. So I have one more video I'm going to share with you a little bit about our Food is Medicine program, which we piloted a few years ago, working with cardiac rehab patients and giving them like weekly access to fresh produce and cooking lessons. And we are expanding that this year to work specifically with Southeast Asian and Latinx residents who either have been diagnosed with diabetes or are predisposed to diabetes.
Hi, my name is Jessica Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of Mill City Grows, which is a food justice organization in Lowell, Massachusetts in the USA. Our mission is to help people improve their health, improve the local economy, and regenerate the land by making access to land and locally grown food, as well as food education available to everyone. Each year, we work with 15,000 people and we help them access healthy food and food education. And we grow in gardens and farms on nearly 7 acres of land in our city. Lowell is a small city, but it's very diverse, and a very high percentage struggle with diet-related diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and cardiac disease. Since science has shown us that eating more produce can help with long-term health outcomes, we created the Food is Medicine Farm Share program to help people integrate more produce into their diet. We've worked directly with healthcare providers in our city, such as our local hospital and our community health center, so that we can meet patients who are already receiving medical care and then supplement their care plan with access to healthy food. We piloted this program with a small group of cardiac rehab patients, and we are planning to expand to work with diabetes patients in 2021. Through the course of the program, each participant will receive a weekly share of produce along with recipes that have been approved by a nutritionist. We worked with graduate students to help write nutritional info for each of the recipes as well. When patients come to pick up their produce, they actually have the option to choose what they like best, which we found is usually the best way to ensure that people will eat the food. There's also a food educator on site, and she can answer any questions people have. And most weeks they're actually able to test one of the recipes. So there's tasting cups available of one of the recipes that's available in their share, such as a salad or a soup or a smoothie. We invite participants to join us for a family cooking class at some point through the year, where they were able to work together with members of their own household, as well as other participants in the program, to make and share a meal. We do these programs virtually during quarantine. But our goal here is really to get the whole household invested in making this dietary change. We are working with a group of graduate students at the University of Massachusetts Lowell to analyze data over a 2-year study of this program, and that report will be forthcoming. But we have interviewed participants, and what we've learned from them is that they actually weren't familiar with cooking with fresh produce. So this program has actually introduced them to new types of foods as well as new methods of cooking. And the biggest motivator for staying in the program was actually relationships that they built with other people who were in the program. So in the future, we'd like to have more opportunities for participants to get together and cook and learn, as well as offering them a plot in one of our 8 community gardens. Because we understand that building relationships with others who are working on learning about healthy eating is actually the best way to build that new habit.
Thanks. And so one of the reasons, we had decided we were working with our local community center, we really wanted to focus and target this program towards Southeast Asian and Latinx residents. Was there are more, I think, more folks in Lowell who have diabetes and diet-related disease than any of the surrounding towns. But in those 2 particular demographics, the discrepancy, the rate of diabetes is even higher. And so one of the things that we've done with Lowell Community Health Center was we created a cookbook, and it's in English and Khmer, that goes through like a lot of the ingredients that can support health if you have diabetes versus aggravate your condition, and talked through lots of traditional recipes and how they could be modified to be diabetes friendly. And I think that, looking at this with the lens of like cultural relevance and cultural competence is really important to all of us in Lowell, because we want to make sure that the solutions that we're offering are respectful and doable for everybody in our community. I know there have been a lot of things that came up in the chat, and I wasn't able to read them all while I was talking, but I think if there's anything in here, are you willing to share those recipes and advise? Absolutely. So the cookbook we can definitely share with you to distribute, and all of our we're actually developing like a kind of community recipe book that's all plant-based recipes from all the folks that we work with in Lowell, so from lots of different cultures, and we wanted to kind of publish and share that for our 10th anniversary this year, so that would definitely be something that we could share as well.
A couple of us had questions about lead and chemical remediation in the soil and how you were addressing that.
Yes, thank you for asking that. So that was a big piece of kind of why we wanted to start the Community Gardens program in the first place. Was we knew there are lots of people who garden in Lowell in their backyards, and we wanted to make sure they kind of understood that being a city that has a long history of industrial work, that there can be that kind of like heavy metals in the soil and things that you want to avoid growing in. So in all of our growing sites, we do soil testing. We don't grow in the ground in any of our community gardens. So everything is in raised beds. There's kind of a barrier that's put down in the bottom of the beds, and it's all filled with compost that we purchase from a trusted source. On our larger farms, we do kind of raised on the ground beds. So there's some, landscaping fabric underneath, and we've brought in soil and compost that we put on over, and then we bring in, we are bringing in a lot of new soil each year, and we started making our own compost as well. But we do soil testing each year at that large farm, just to make sure we, with any changes are happening, we see them. But creating raised beds and using soil that we kind of know the makeup of is the way that we're avoiding that. And we do advise, if anybody is growing at home, we give them, resources of places where they can get soil, or we help them, obtain those resources. And we did do a project, I think a few years back, working with a lot of other organizations who wanted to make gardening a part of their work, building garden beds, and then helping to educate them about, what contaminants might be in the soil in Lowell. So that's definitely an ongoing part of our education that we do with folks.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us and making time to be here with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back to Emily so we can keep the ball moving.
Great. Thank you. That was wonderful, really inspiring. Hendrix, can you cue up the next slide? We're going to just roll right into the next one. And while we're waiting for that, I just want to mention that we're happy to share these slides. And I'm pretty sure all the presenters are fine with you having access to this material. So there are links to the videos and the slide decks. Okay, so our last topic is climate justice, and LENA ENTIN with Community Action Works and also neighbor to neighbor affiliation is going to moderate and also do a little bit of the presenting. So LENA, with that, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. So good to see you. So wonderful to see all your faces. Shout out to those of you who I know, and wonderful to be on this panel. Thank you for inviting me. So here we are, we're like a little more than halfway through this amazing virtual conference together. And we all know that the way that we're going to get to that beautiful world that we know is possible is by taking care of ourselves. So I just want to take 30 seconds to invite everyone to take care of yourselves before we get into the next panel. So first of all, thinking of all of you for whom English is not your native language, thinking of LUCILIA, thank you for interpreting. I'm going to invite you all to take a 30-second quiet moment to give our minds a break, to give our interpreter a break. And I invite you all to just breathe. Breathe in the air. So we're just going to be quiet for about 30 seconds. And now I'll quietly invite you all back in. We all know that part of language justice is taking care of our interpreters. LUCILIA, let us know if we are going too quickly. And I also want to give us a moment to move our bodies. So if you all want to join me, we're going to channel our inner tree and reach those branches up to the sky. Just reach up, 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 up. Reach as high as you can. Stand on your tiptoes. If you're not able to stand and you're sitting, reach out. Reach your arms out and up. And now let's reach down to the roots. So many of us are building the grassroots. You can go off your camera for a second. Just reach down, down, down to the roots. Reach down. Oh, reach down. Take one last big breath, come back up. Oh, one last big breath. And come in. And welcome to our panel. Hopefully we got the oxygen flowing a little bit. As Emily said, I'm training coordinator with Neighbor to Neighbor Massachusetts and also deputy director with Community Action Works, previously known as Toxics Action Center. And in this panel, we'll be exploring climate justice and energy democracy initiatives that are helping to build the solidarity economy. We'll look at how these initiatives depart from capitalism in order to put people and planet over profit in a new solidarity economy. So we'll be exploring how those key principles guide our work and move us away from an exploitative capitalist economy to a solidarity economy. We'll be looking at solidarity, participatory democracy, equity, sustainability, pluralism. And I'm going to share a campaign led by Neighbor to Neighbor and Community Action Works, where we moved in a just transition away from coal to solar energy at the Mount Tom site in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And then I'll pass it over to Jen Stevenson ZEPETA, Associate Director for Climable.org, to talk about energy democracy and how it intersects with solidarity economy. So in a minute, I'm going to show you a video about how former factory workers in the working class city of Holyoke, Neighbor to Neighbor members, Latinx grandparents, parents, and aunties came together to take on a multinational corporate exploitative giant and put forward the possibilities for a new economy that wasn't based on exploitation of labor and the environment, but one that was centering people in the community, and that was led by the people who live next door to the energy facility. And as you watch this video, you can take in how we were centering the principles of solidarity economy, thinking about sustainability. Neighbor to Neighbor members led this work with a dedication to caring for the earth and making our environment better for generations to come after us. And solidarity, you'll see how we came together across struggles, where racial justice activists living right next door to the coal plant came together with environmental activists from towns nearby and bridged what we all know is the false divide between labor and the environment. We knew that capitalism defines the worker as being at odds with those who care for the environment, but we know that's not true. And so we reached across that bridge to form our natural alliance and to put both people and planet over profit. We actually don't have to choose, as we all know, right? And you'll see participatory democracy and pluralism. The folks who led this campaign were not the white middle-class activists from nearby towns who fought for environmental and climate issues for decades. Nope. It was the Latinx community members living in the shadow of the coal plant right in Holyoke who were suffering from asthma and other respiratory problems caused by pollution that led the fight every step of the way. And unfortunately, the video I'm going to share was made 10 years after our 10-year fight, at the very end of our 10-year fight. And during that fight, I want to take a moment to just thank Carlos Rodriguez, Vilma Vasquez, and Virgenina Perez, who led the campaign for 8 long years and passed away from health problems that they were trying to prevent. They were paving the way for the future, for future generations. And though they're not in this video and I had to share their stories, I want you to know that they were leading every step of the way. And that's what we mean by participatory democracy. And their vision was complex and diverse and embodied what we know to be true, that there is no one right answer in building a different future. It takes all of our ideas. And the campaign also centered equity. Carlos, Virgenina, Rosa, Carmelo, They call out environmental racism. This coal plant was not burning coal in Holyoke by accident. We know how it works. We know how capitalism works. Coal plants and other polluting facilities near white wealthy towns had long been shut down. So not only did Neighbor to Neighbor members call out environmental racism, but they upended the paradigm. They led meetings as peers with white corporate executives. And we know that in the solidarity economy future, we don't have race, gender, language, citizen status-based exclusions and oppression. And we were modeling that through this campaign. So in a minute, I'm going to share this video and you can watch for these, how you can see a solidarity economy playing out in the moment in this campaign.
So Holyoke is a city of a little over 40,000 people. We have a rich history. We're the birthplace of volleyball, the first city in the country to make paper. We're nicknamed the Paper City. We have a history of immigration. We're about 49% Latino.
Holyoke had an active coal power burning plant for 50 years.
Asthma rates in the city are twice as high as the rest of the state. It is possible to transition from coal to clean energy. When we first started this work in Holyoke, we never thought that it would be tit for tat, that we would literally be able to close a coal-fired power plant and redevelop a solar farm in its place. My name is Sylvia Brody, and I'm the Executive Director of Toxics Action Center. We organize with communities that are on the front lines of the worst threats to environment and health across our region.
Toxics Action Center approached Neighbor to Neighbor sometime in 2010 around a very interesting and important campaign to close a coal plant in the backyard of one of the towns where Neighbor to Neighbor organizes, called Holyoke.
So we first heard about the Mount Tom coal plant when I was with Neighbor to Neighbor, and we were organizing on a campaign to bring local jobs to the city. And we started talking about this coal plant that had been here for 50 years, and it was such an eyesore. And I thought, you know, I don't know if we're really going to organize to shut down this coal plant. We're working for local jobs here. And then we had a community discussion about it.
Tenemos un problema bien serio aquí en la ciudad de Holyoke, que hay mucha contaminación en el aire, hay muchos casos de asma. El aire está tan contaminado, me está dando mucha asma. He estado, en un año he estado como 4 veces en el hospital.
Because we were working with people from the community that kept on pushing us, to ask these very important and critical questions. What's going to happen to the workers once the coal plant is closed? And then our members asked again, well, what's going to happen to the site? Right? Great question.
It was really the folks on the ground from Neighbor to Neighbor that led the charge for a reuse study.
And so the conversation became about what's the best real reuse that's going to benefit everyone in the community.
Thank goodness for Toxics Action Center. Claire Miller came out and walked us through a corporate campaign.
GDF Suez, they were playing very hard to get.
Porque no quería cerrar su planta, pero no miraba el daño que le estaba haciendo a todos los alrededores, a los peces, a las personas, al ambiente y al aire y al agua, porque se contamina todo.
And so we decided we had to escalate the pressure. And so we are coming. We sent them an exact date and an exact time to your office on this date. And you can meet with us and talk about it, or we can hold a press conference outside of your office saying how you've refused to meet with us. And so we got a letter back from GDF Suez saying, we'll meet with you right here in Holyoke at the coal plant. At the meeting, Vice President of North American Affairs, John Chu, says, well, we know, we've seen the writing on the wall. We may have to close the coal plant. We're considering converting to solar energy, but we don't know if we can make a profit. And Carlos said, are you kidding me? You've been making us sick for 50 years and all you can talk about is making a profit?
News since 6 o'clock, the Mount Tom coal plant is on its way to retirement.
The former coal-fired power station is being replaced with more than 17,000 solar panels, making it the state's largest solar farm.
Esa fue la noticia mejor que recibí.
In the end, we did it. We transformed the Mount Tom coal-fired power plant from coal to solar. And so we really saw, our vision for a better world become a reality in Holyoke.
And it wasn't us in suits and ties, it was the people on the ground that had their shirts, that had their neighbor shirts, and had their We Want Clean Air Now shirts and their banners. That's what was powerful, and that's what moved the needle.
They got their retirement package, they got severance packages, and State Representative Aaron Vega threw in $100,000 of state funding for job training programs for some of the younger workers.
We're moving towards a clean energy future. We're committed to work with our community to make sure that everybody has energy that's carbon-free and is green and is clean and isn't going to hurt your children, isn't going to poison our air.
Neighbor, we continue really holding on to the promise that the way forward is to organize, to do exactly the work that we do, which is to go door to door, connect with people at the doors, hear their stories at the doors, pay attention to what they are saying.
We have this incredible solidarity between Neighbor to Neighbor and Toxics Action Center. I can't imagine having taken this on our own.
Aprendí que para uno lograr algo tienes que luchar. Si tú no luchas, no se logra.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Finally moved in.
It's a great old house.
Oops.
Good bones,
Sorry,
wraparound
guys.
porch.
Pipes are making strange noises.
At least got
There we go. Great. Well, I hope you were all able to hear the video and see it. I'm always hoping that, working from home, we always hope our internet holds up. So we are going to have room for questions after our second presenter goes. So I'm going to take a minute to introduce Jen, who's going to share some time, and then we'll have questions, and then we can have a wrap up at the end of the panel. So just briefly though, before I introduce Jen, our Coal to Soul adventure actually ended in, the work is always ongoing, but in 2019, Carmelo Diaz had been fighting since 2011 for a real cleanup of the plant, including tearing down the chimney of the coal plant. And in 2019, many of you who live in Western Massachusetts know that chimney went down because we wanted to see the full picture. We're not just talking about shutting down the coal plant and putting barbed wire around it, right? We are talking about also a just transition for the community. We were organizing to have a full cleanup of the site. We were organizing to make sure that the workers are cared for in the transition, to have those pieces of solidarity economy. So with that, I want to introduce Jen Stevenson Zepeta, who is Associate Director of Climable.org. Climable is a women-run nonprofit working to make climate science and clean energy understandable and actionable for everyone. And one of Climable's larger projects involves clean energy accessibility in environmental justice neighborhoods. And as part of the Run GJC team, Climable is helping advance energy democracy by collaborating on community microgrids in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and Boston's Chinatown. So Climable also has similar projects, but in earlier phases, starting in Cambridge and Loíza, Puerto Rico. And Jen will be speaking today about Run GJC. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Lena. Can you hear me okay? Great. You are a tough act to follow, and I am not, I'm a hesitant public speaker, so I will also just say that when I get nervous, I speak fast, so just wave your arms if I get going too fast. But I do want to share my screen, and just give me a moment to get that set up. There we are. Can everyone see that? Great. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. And as Lena mentioned, I am here to represent not just Climable, but our work and collaboration with Run GJC. So I thought it would be helpful to just kind of run through what Run GJC is, because it's not straightforward. Basically, there's two groups that came together, and there's about 9 organizations and individuals involved. Run stands for Resilient Urban Neighborhoods, and that's the team that Climable came to be a part of, and we serve as kind of technical translators on that team. And so there's lots of engineers, and if any of you have interacted with engineers, they speak a separate language that requires deciphering. And the idea that Run had was that if microgrids make sense in affluent communities, then they should make just as much, if not more sense, in low and moderate income neighborhoods, because they're hit first and worst. And so that was kind of a concept that led to a design. And fortuitously, Run was introduced to GJC, which stands for the Green Justice Coalition. They're a coalition of about, I don't know, 30-ish nonprofits in Massachusetts. They're convened by Community Labor United, and they had been wanting to get involved with microgrids too. So it was just happenstance, I think, that we knew the right people and we were introduced. And then we had been working collaboratively for over 4 years, largely pro bono, on building a community microgrid. And so I should say that we firmly believe that the community knows best what is best for them. What are their challenges? What are their needs? And so in a commitment to the team, we all basically agree that we're not using a top-down approach, that we're putting our trust in the community organizations that work in these neighborhoods and do that hard work and have the trusted relationships. And so as such, Green Roots is the organization in Chelsea that anchors that project. They've been in operation for over 25 years. They know everybody. They do excellent work. And the counterpart in Chinatown is the one I'm going to focus on today. And that's the Chinese Progressive Association, or CPA. And so they're both basically the same microgrid, but just with 2 geographies. The other thing to point out here, I suppose, is that in the past year to year and a half, I would say, CPA brought on the Chinatown Community Land Trust, or CCLT, as one of the organizations that could potentially own or govern or operate the microgrid once it's fully realized. So we're still in design and planning phase. But to generate buy-in and consensus around this type of work, which is massive, you can't just necessarily go up to people on the street and talk about resilience and microgrids, because they'll look at you like you're crazy. So as an introduction to the topic, we helped form a survey of over 200 residents in Chinatown, and we couched it in the terms of emergency preparedness. So there were questions like, how many days worth of food do you have on hand in case there's an extensive power outage? And so there's some random percentages and statistics here that we pulled from the survey. But what I thought was fascinating was that over 78% of the people we spoke to, 78% 78% were interested in attending a community meeting on microgrids, which is shocking to me. And then over 83% of people were interested in learning more about a community emergency plan. And they're very similar topics. So that's encouraging for the work that we're trying to do to build this community-centric microgrid to serve the community and build resilience that way. The goals of the project are numerous, but I'll just go through them here. One is there are a lot of threats to Chinatown: extreme heat, extreme cold, flooding. So one of the goals of the project is to provide resilience in the form of reliable electricity to residents, because if you have someone with a medical device that requires electricity to run, if you have people who have medication that needs to be refrigerated, or if you have people with some mobility issues and they need to be able to use an elevator, electricity is central to all of that. And so we think of this as like a public health and just a holistic like community preparedness plan, because electricity is such a huge part of that. Another thing that we're looking at is reducing energy burden. You know, so when we're talking about installing clean energy assets at a building or doing extensive energy efficiency upgrades, we are mindful of the fact that in low and moderate income neighborhoods or EJ neighborhoods, there is a higher percentage of the people's paychecks that go towards paying their utility bills. So not only are we committed to not making those bills higher, we would really like to make sure that when we do this, we do it correctly and we help reduce energy burden. Another goal is modeling a community-owned and driven approach. And I think that one's pretty self-explanatory, but this is kind of, you know, coming up with a new vision for the energy system and bringing power to the people, like metaphorically and literally in a different way, because so many, for energy is like such a out of sight, out of mind topic that it's hard for some people to conceptualize, but getting people involved in the discussion is super important. And so we hope that this project serves as a catalyst for changing that system a bit. And then, or not just a bit. And the last thing that we're hoping to do is if we are able to enter into contracts with the people who will do this work in a thoughtful way, we could potentially create apprenticeship programs and trainings for the installation of solar panels or the operation and maintenance of all the different components that we're talking about, and help boost the economy that way, kind of like in a Green New Deal style holistic approach. So I'm not going to spend much time on the technology. I just kind of wanted to show you what the vision is. Solar panels wherever possible. If we're using backup generators, there's a commitment to green fuels because of the lower emissions, batteries at every building. And then the first step is, of course, energy efficiency, and that will help occupant comfort and reduce energy bills and create lots of savings. The two things on this little image that I want to point out are EVs, because EVs are cool, but Chinatown's, one of their big concerns is gentrification. And if you just go and plop EV charging infrastructure all over the place, you're probably not helping on the gentrification front. But we do see electric vehicles as a way to provide both emergency transportation and backup battery power for the microgrid. So we're thinking about it more in terms of like, are there ultra affordable car sharing programs we can leverage for this project? What about electric bikes and scooters and things of that nature? Are there other things that are actually going to help people in the community without causing gentrification? And then the other thing is the satellite hotspots, because one of our lessons learned when we look at catastrophes in other places in the US, like Harvey or Katrina or Irma or Maria, is the fact that people aren't able to communicate with either emergency services or loved ones. And that's so huge. So we've built in this trifecta of uninterruptible satellite internet connection so people can communicate with the people they need to in an emergency. And on a sunny day, we still get our electricity from the utility, and we are able to use the energy that our microgrid has produced to raise some money to pay for those assets. And in an emergency, if there were a power, oops, skipped ahead. If there were a power outage, those buildings maintain power. And so then those people that I was mentioning that might have to be able to use an elevator or might have to have their insulin refrigerated, they're not jeopardized and their well-being is in check. And that's so important. So we've been plugging along on this project for over 4 years. The vision in Chinatown is a cooperative that potentially CPA and CCLT might form, a nonprofit with a board of people with representation from building owners and tenants and people in the community that are making decisions democratically and thoughtfully and in line with our team's values and vision. And what I get excited about is thinking, okay, yes, we're going to do this in Chelsea, and yes, we're going to do this in Chinatown, but we're really just demonstrating a model that other people could go and do. And if we can get through the big humps that we've been struggling with, like how do you decide on the governance model, and how do you decide on the ownership model? And like, those are really big questions that we're wrestling with. But once we come up with a pattern, it can be implemented all across wherever, you know, and really hold promise in being a replicable, scalable transformation of the energy system by giving people resilience and a say in their energy system. So that was all I had planned to say, but I'm happy to answer questions. Oops, and you're muted, Lena.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you for presenting. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry that we don't have much time for questions. Maybe you could just quickly answer how the biofuel works, if you had a 30-second answer, and then I'll hand it back to Emily.
A 30-second answer on biofuels, sure. So they're not totally emissions free, and I'm not an expert, but I would say that a traditional generator is probably going to use diesel or natural gas, but there are some alternative products you could use, like green diesel, which is made out of like waste corn product, for example. It's being used in California a ton. There's limited supply in New England, but that's one option. And another one is methane from anaerobic digesters, which is like if you're composting, you can capture that gas, and it basically has the same qualities as natural gas, and you could use that without too many modifications to the equipment.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And thanks so much for presenting. And let's pass it back to Emily.
Thank you both. That was just, these presentations have all been so great and informative. And I love all the comments. They're all getting a lot of love. So thank you to all the presenters. Great job. And we're actually into the home stretch of just closing it out. So I'm going to turn it over to AMETHYST CAREY from the Center for Economic Democracy. AMETHYST, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. And thank you to everyone who shared with us today. I was so inspired and curious and excited to hear what everyone had to say. And I'm always grateful to be in these different MASEN spaces. So I'm really curious. I'm just actually gonna pause for a moment and ask, like, what are y'all, how are y'all feeling? We just heard for almost 2 hours these incredible presentations from all over the state, from all different folks. If you wanna put it in the chat, or if you're brave and wanna come off mute and just share a word or a sentence, how are you feeling? What are you thinking about after hearing from our lovely speakers?
I feel the warmth of solidarity. I'm completely inspirada, so inspired.
Solidarity, yes, thank you. Feeling, wow, yes. Yes, Hendrix, I love that. What about others? Hope.
Totally inspired.
Inspired. Awesome. Thanks to those who shared. You still have time to put it in the chat. Grateful. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so inspiring. There's so much amazing work happening. I want to, Juji picked the word that I was thinking about, inspired deeply, deeply, which brings me to something I wanted to share. Usually social media it's a fraught place, but I actually saw a tweet that came to me and I was thinking about what I wanted to plan for. And it said something to the effects of anti-capitalists always being bitter and cynical, but actually you know, it takes a lot of hope and courage to believe that a world better than this one is possible. And again, when I was present and listening to these presentations today, it reminded me of that. I am inspired. It takes hope and inspiration and courage to actually think, no, we can have something different. And it's been an incredibly rough year for so many of us. Not everyone has joined us to today and has made it into this moment. And yet in the midst of the struggle and the suffering, we have began to see so many fruits of our labor come to bear. I think the presentations that were shared with us today are efforts of that. Folks might have heard about in the climate justice front, for example, we have this incredible microgrid project, and we also have the halt of the Keystone Pipeline that came after years and years and years of organizing, right? In the reparations and food and farming world, we have the Justice for Black Farmers Act, which people might be familiar with, that is again seeking for repair and financially, also with land access for Black farmers that have been disadvantaged and intentionally stolen from for years. I would love to actually, again, make space, and I know we're wrapping up on time, so I won't pause to read them, but would love to invite you all to also share some of the wins that you've seen, the fruits of long fought campaigns or things you've seen on the news that have been inspirational. And I lift those up not to diminish the fact that it's a hard time where you can't all be positive and smiley, but I think that we live in that. For many of us, we're living in that struggle in the day-to-day, and it's a really important practice of, it's a muscle to practice hope and to practice encouragement and inspiration. So I'd love to hear people and see people lift up. Yes, thank you, Lisa, I appreciate this.
Anna's been chomping at the bit. I know she has a lot to say.
Mm-hmm. Please feel free if you want to speak to anything.
And
oh, I just know Annalisa's like been in the background, like jumping in her seat and crying. This is like the vision.
Yes, thank you.
Completely. I feel so aligned with what people are sharing, and to be in this together feels like it's totally doable as a larger kind of more global kind of community feeling, and it's essential to our getting there.
Yes, absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. I actually was gonna, it's a perfect transition that I couldn't have planted better. Thank you for sharing with us. I don't know if everyone here was able to I don't know if everyone here was able to join the first of these MASEN sessions, but I just want to really point out, I think the various gatherings that MASEN has coordinated are an important reminder that in order to win, we also have to unite as a movement. These individual projects are such essential sites of personal transformations, of being able to learn and explore these new ideas. But without movement, without us all coming together, we won't be able to win, and we won't be able to organize for the systemic change that we know we need to see all of us brought along. And so I appreciate, again, this container for really lifting up the importance to unite across sector, across state-imposed borders and boundaries, and with multiple strategies to meet people where they're at and to bring them along with us. So again, I'm grateful for MASEN as our local connection to an international solidarity economy movement. And again, I appreciate the grounding of it. It's not just in Massachusetts, it's everywhere. And I appreciate, again, MASEN is a network that prioritizes the success of alternatives, of solidarity economy businesses and infrastructure, as much as it also makes space for personal transformation and building the relationships that we need to actually hold our movement together. So if you've been inspired by things you've learned today, I want to also remind y'all or encourage you that there are ways to plug in to our work in the future. I don't know if we can share the slide, but I know them off the top of my mind because I'm grateful to be a part of MASEN. There's a few different ways to stay up to date with what we've got going on. The first is to subscribe to our Commonwealth, which is a collaborative newsletter between MASEN, the Coalition for Worker Ownership and Power, Co-op, which is the network that I coordinate, and the Center for Economic Democracy. It's a great way to see inspirational stories, to learn what events we have going on, and then to be able to plug in. The second is to join the Mapping and Value Chain Working Group, which is co-held by Hendrix and I want to emphasize that Hendrix has really been moving us along. Again, an effort with a few different priorities, but the first of which that's moving and making some really exciting developments is a mapping, an effort to map out solidarity economy enterprises across our state, and again, tied up to this bigger global movement. And then finally, I should have put my glasses on before I went, to join the Gathering and Events Working Group, a group that I believe helped to actually pull everything together again today. So with that, I want to say again, thank you all for being here, for joining, for navigating technical difficulties, for centering language justice and ensuring that folks who speak all different languages were able to join today and hear and learn from y'all. Another thank you to our sponsors for today. I know Emily shouted them out in the beginning, but again, your support is essential for us to be able to organize and create the kind of spaces and gatherings that we had today. I think that with that, I want to wrap up my closing and again, encourage people, the feeling that we generate today on this call, the inspiration, the excitement, the wow, we can create that for ourselves. And we create that consistently and constantly in the MASEN space. So please, I encourage you to join us. And I hope to see you all again soon. I'll turn it over to Emily to see if there's anything else to say before we close out.
Oh, I don't think so. I do want to underscore, and I think we failed to make this really clear, that when MASEN was created, when we launched this network, we also launched the sister network that Amethyst just mentioned, which is capital C, little o, and capital WOP, which stands for Collaborative of Worker Ownership and Power. Did I get it right?
Very close. It's a new name. The coalition, it's okay. Coalition for Worker Ownership and Power, which represents the worker ownership. So worker co-ops, as well as ESOPs and other worker-owned and governed firms. We're trying to advance an equitable movement for that. And we're really excited to be the sort of worker ownership hat within the broader network that MASEN covers.
So we grew out of the same, well, sort of, we grew out of the same series of meetings, and we just want to make sure that we're always staying really closely connected, sister networks. So yeah. And with that, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you for that closing, Amethyst. Thank you everybody for joining us. It's great to see everybody. We will send out the recording, and we'll also share that needs and offers spreadsheet. And so if you have any needs or offers that you want to add there, please do.
Can I just ask, for accessibility reasons, can somebody take the contact info out of the chat and put it in another form? That would be really appreciated.
Oh, I see. Before we share the
because when you close, all of the links and everything will disappear, and those of us with motor issues can't, and low levels of technology, like I don't have a computer. So if it could be like copied by somebody with the good technology and the physical ability and put into another form so we don't lose any info, that would be awesome.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Uh-oh, Annalisa, I think
that's the low tech, low reception.
We can't really...
Mountain is reaching. But yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's so important to make this fully accessible so that more of us can feel like we got all the pieces to it. And the chat seemed like a very important part of kind of complementing everything going on at once. The other thing is, it would be so helpful if there could be a link when there's the invite to know exactly where people can go for interpretation, because I know several of our members are on or were on the call and needed interpretation, but I'm not totally sure if they knew like how how to access it. So maybe if that went out with the invite itself or something.
Good idea.
That's a great idea, because Anna, we did it at the very, very beginning, but that's not La Hora Latina. And you're right, it should be like, because of that, like sometimes the time culturally is different. It'd be great to have that out ahead of time, or
That's a
point
great
person.
idea. Yeah, we will do that, because we are planning a third one. So we'll absolutely take that into account. Thank you so much. We are at time. Happy, if there's any other feedback, feel free to contact any of the conveners. But thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend, and we'll see you next time.
También. Gracias a todos.
Gracias, muchas gracias, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Adiós.
Thank you.
Hasta pronto.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, gracias.
Bye, Nancy.
Thanks, Emily.
Adiós.
Great to see everybody. So I don't know if the conveners want to stay on and do even just a really quick debrief. I think we might have lost some. Let's see.
Yeah.
So if you were part of the planning team and interpreters and our tech wizard, and let's see, who do we not have? Let's see. We lost Alex, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody want to text Alex and just see if he wants to jump on real quick, just super fast. Who else are we missing? The organizers.
I have to head out, but I will volunteer to set up another plus delta reflection spreadsheet. And if we want to find time to talk about, to review, that would be great. Or we could just do it online. You guys can decide, but I'll send that out.
Okay, great.
Great job, everybody. I thought it went really well. All right, take care.
Thank you, Hendrix. Bye.
Thanks for your support.
Okay.
Next time. Bye.
Let's see, of the organizing team, we're just missing Alex. Is that right?